Alright, so I realized when I made my Utah reset video that I didn't do the ground cover correctly. So now, when when you paint the terrain for grass, for example, all you get is a grass with no actual ground model data. Like, it paints what looks like grass, but it's just 3D normals. So in order to kind of fix that and get your grass to actually painting grass, which looks like that, it's kind of a few things to cover, and I didn't really realize all of that until yesterday, and I realized when I was kind of making my first map that man, I didn't really understand ground cover at all, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. And there was one video, Terry Martin Art, he kind of led me on the path on how to add them, because you do have to map the ground cover stuff to the terrain paint data, essentially. So that's not something that will just happen by default. Now, if the reason why this all started was because when I went through, I deleted all the stuff from my scene tree in that video. And in doing that, I actually deleted my ground cover leaves. And if you're making a map, you need these ground cover leaves because they actually map to the terrain paint. So I kind of want to shed some light on that, because if I forget how to do it, and I sure know that if someone's looking at this fresh, they're not going to know how to do it. They're not going to have any idea what links what to what, and their brain is just going to be overwhelmed. So let me see if I can actually shed some light. So if I go to my grass 1 in my terrain paint, which is already done, grass, well, it's just called grass. You get some grass, and it has some weird stuff. Like, it's basically a procedurally generated, think of in Blender, a instance on a surface. So an instance on you can have instance on points on a bunch of points, instance on a surface, and you're just rendering a object on every one of those points, and you can change things like the radius, the render radius, how far it renders, how many per grid, all that good stuff. And I went through and I actually did take all of the settings from the Utah grass, and I realized that when you create a new grass or a new ground cover, it doesn't actually say take the settings in there. At the leaves, if you just do a create object, ground cover in environment, ground cover. So if I do a ground cover create and I go to select it, it doesn't have any of the settings retained that you would normally see in like a default level. Like, all of these things are not the same as what you would see on the ground cover mappings there. So it's something when you do set it up, it's a manual process, and that's kind of reminds me of Blender, because Blender's all manual, and that gives you a lot of flexibility in how you can make your map look, which is actually very cool. So in order to kind of unwrap all of that, and I'm going to be straightforward, I don't know everything there is to know about how ground cover maps with terrain. To be honest, that's been the most difficult part of this entire process, and how to figure out how that works. I mean, I got DAEs down, I got every other piece down. You can make a map, but let's say you in theory wanted to map ground cover data on a custom height map that you imported that was 200 by 200 kilometers, or something like that. I mean, you look at these maps for Utah is only, what, 2048 by 2048 on the terrain. So that's only, what, 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, if you think about it. So to make a custom height map where all of the terrain data works, where you can just go here, grass 2 and paint, or grass 1 and paint, whichever. In order to get that to work, that kind of that takes a little bit of thought. And I don't know if anybody on a map that is not from Beam, I don't know if anybody has that figured out. I'm not sure if a custom map maker that makes those big large maps, if they can actually do terrain painting. So I don't know. But I do want to make this video to conclude my Utah map, which didn't really cover ground cover very good, so I kind of wanted to shed that light. So to start there, let's go to what we're talking about. So if you look at the main level folder, we're going to edit that. So I really needed to talk about this real quick. So in the main folder, if you look at all of these terrain materials, these terrain materials are tied to physics in the game, how the car handles on the ground. So if you have a warning material, it's going to basically, you're going to get an error and it's going to reset to like asphalt. But if you look at this list, this is the list exactly from Utah. So one thing to note is at the very end, notice how there's not a decimal or a comma. Notice how there's not a comma. So at the very end, you have to make sure that there's nothing after the end parentheses on the last material. I didn't mention that in any video before, but that's pretty important if you're ever changing materials or like adding new materials, terrains rather, to your map. You want to make sure that the format is exactly like the, how it should be. So when you're looking at the main root directory, there's really only a few spots you need to talk about when you're looking at like how the terrain paints with all of this. So first thing is here. That's the main, and it could be a different name depending on what map you're looking at, but at the end of the day, there's going to be one terrain JSON in the root folder, and that's this guy. That's what houses all of these guys. The main terrain materials, essentially, how the car handles on the terrain. So the next guy would be art terrains. If I go here, look at that. Don't worry about beach sand, that's not from Utah. I added that, that's custom. But the rest of the stuff should be just straight from Utah with the exception of me renaming the map directory. So if you look, it's just like an exact image of what's from Utah. So that is the terrains folder. Then we have the ground cover folder, which is in art, shapes, ground cover. So if we look at ground cover, so this BeamNG grass is getting created by the game and I don't know how to get it out of there. And that's going to lead me to how to fix and get you some grass on your terrain paint, so that way you, when you follow my previous video, you at least have some way of painting grass, which is actually, unique because I can't find a way to add it to the forest editor. I don't want to try. It's cool because you can add it to the terrain painter, which is perfectly fine. So this actually gets created by the game. I don't know why. And then everything above it is actually from the Utah ground cover material file. So the only thing I had to do was I just made sure there was a parentheses right here, or I mean a comma rather, and then I ended it with no comma. So yeah, just make sure that has no comma at the end. But I've tried setting this to, like, I've tried deleting that line. I haven't tried setting this to none, but I haven't found a way to get the issue that I'm about to show to go away. So I'm going to show you the issue and I'm going to show you the workaround and the way to actually just get some grass. So that's essentially what we're going to do. So I'm just going to close this. Close that. So that's pretty much it for the folder stuff, I guess. So if I actually look at shapes, ground cover, I have some DAE files in here. I got those from the Utah map. We're actually going to use those to paint some grass, along with our grass terrain paint. And I've tried deleting that, and that yields no material on the grass stuff unless I tell it to just paint the DAE file, which is basically my end solution for this until I figure out how to actually make it work better. So anyway, let me just show this. So if I go here, let me just get this open back here. So if I go to my object editor and I select the first one I made, which is the one that's already working, the reason why it says BeamNG grass here is because if I go under types, and note, types doesn't automatically expand. You have to like manually expand it every time you look at it. I don't know why, but That's just how it is. It's easy to miss. I missed it forever. But if I go under types and I do actually look at it, so this layer right here, that has to be the same name as your terrain material library, this guy. So the syntax on this name, ground model grass, grass, is the ground model. It's using this name right here. And when you paste it into your layer, that's essentially how it maps. So let me close that. So what we're going to do, I have to create grass 2 and I have to create grass 3. Basically, in order to get my grass 2 to paint grass, which it does it now. See how it's not painting grass, it's just painting nothing, painting my 3D normals. In order to get that to fix, what I'm going to do is kind of go through and give you the gist. So let's do that. Alright, and I should probably put a thank Terry Martin Art, because man, if it wasn't for his video about it, I probably would never have found the solution. I did see something obscure in like a random forum comment about it, but never really quite put my head together about how ground data maps to terrain data and the painter. And I always thought it was like a JSON. Oh, it's just a JSON. No, it's actually something you have to do in the world editor. And it's kind of cool because there's a lot of things that you have to do in the world editor to make maps in BeamNG Drive, so let's add grass 2. So let's see. If I go to my grass guy, which I actually already added, so like if, I already went through, like did I can't remember, I've re-recorded this video, but if you just do the plus environment, ground cover, you really have to have one, I think, for each thing. Like if you have a second terrain, I mean you could do layers, like so let's say this one's already done. I'm just going to let's use 2 as an example. So for ground cover 2, if I look at it, you know what, let me just delete these and start fresh. So I'll just do, let's just start 1 ground cover, and then it's going to be, so if you look at it fresh, BeamNG Grass 3 is kind of what you get. Let me look at my reference pick on my phone. So for grass 2, I'm looking at my phone here to reference. Grass 2 is supposed to be Utah grasses. So if I'm just comparing the settings that I have in the original Utah map that I loaded. Because remember in the beginning I said I accidentally deleted the ground cover out of this scene tree, and that was a mistake. I should have kept the ground covers that I had. I'm pretty sure I went when it was I was kind of starting fresh, but I deleted those. So we're just going to start fresh. So this guy is basically defaulted here. So I want to basically search for Utah grasses. Let's see. Underscore grasses. Let's see what that comes up. So that's grass 2. So let me see if I can paint some grass 2. That's already grass 2. I think sometimes if you change that, you have to restart the game. Or save. Sometimes saving does it, but let's see what happens here. And then types. So under types, with the layer, that is where you want to paste the exact syntax from the terrain file as per Terry Martin Art's video. So in this case it'd be that I can just do this. If I go to terrain library, I can actually go to grass 2 and just copy Control C, the name, close that. I mean, you can just type it, probably doesn't matter. But anyway, it'll find the mapping as you do that, so I'll hit enter. So now, let's see if I save, Control S. I don't know if it's going to show up. Oh yeah. So Utah grasses. So I've been having some issues with some of these showing up. That's what I was trying to show. So if I go to type grass in there, let's say I type BeamNG grass, does that do anything? Yeah, that's the issue. So nothing I select in this material selector is actually going to yield any type of, oops, accidentally double tapped. So nothing in this material selector is actually going to yield me any results. Like for example, if I go back to grass 1 and I have this set to, where's my type? Yeah, so why is that showing me that? Oh, because I'm in the terrain painter. Yeah, so be careful with the terrain painter. Make sure you're looking at the right thing. So I'm in object select, click in grass, the first inspector item, which is this object, the first ground cover. And if I look, so if I basically remove this, oh, let me cut it. So if I cut this out and hit enter and save it, basically then it takes into account the material tab. So if I want something to be used from this right here, I can't have anything in this field right here, which is the shapefile name. But if I do want a shapefile name, I can actually path this to a DAE file, which is how I'm going to solve my grass too. And oh, what happened to that? Okay, that's messed up. But some of this stuff's a little buggy, so just I try to make these videos short and digestible. But man, sometimes it's really hard, you know. And I don't know if I'm just, you know, maybe I don't know. It just seems like it's really complicated, but the more complicated something is, the more powerful it is at the same time. So I kind of appreciate how complicated it is because it is that powerful. You know, like I could, I just magically accidentally changed all that. I don't know how I did that. I didn't mean to do that, but hey, let's try that again. I'm terrible at tutorials. So as you can see in my first ground cover icon, oh man, it keeps doing that. I don't know what I'm doing there, but the first ground cover icon you can tell has path to the DAE file, which is in the shapefile name right here. So that will, in theory, override whatever you have in this material block. So just because that says BeamNG Grass 03, it doesn't render BeamNG Grass 03. But if you have this empty, it will. I hope that explains that point I was trying to get across. So that's kind of irregardless of all these other settings, you know. So you look at the radius, that still will affect how it renders. You know, all of this dissolve, all of these seeds, these all affect based off of the DAE now. So the only thing that doesn't apply is this. And I remember Terry Martin Art was trying to say in his video how there's not a way to set it to none. Well, from what I've seen, there's really no reason to, because none is basically having something in this block that paths to a valid DAE file. So I hope that explains, you know, maybe some of that. But yeah, so you just don't have to worry about what's in here. Now, if you do remove this, you know, like I was trying to explain, if I do remove that and I try and set this to like grass, let's see if that works. So Utah grasses. Oh, now it works. I don't know. Before it wasn't working. Dry grass, see, dry grass doesn't work. And a lot of this is based off the JSON in the material file, but ground mass grass. Nah, I was just trying to see. There was like a issue I was having with it floating in the air, and now I can't recreate it. But anyway, I'm just gonna go back to here. So here's what we're gonna do. On my main grass, since how it's all like super green, I don't want it to look like that. I just want it to be the DAE file. So that's gonna be the ultimate fix for how I make the grass here, I guess, going forward. It's not exactly how it is in Utah in the main map, but it'll definitely get you by. So let's go to my shapefile name. I'm actually going to go Control V and paste my original path. So you really want to, sometimes when you're trying to get to that path, you have to actually type like slash levels slash your map name to get it to actually show up. So if I hit this and I'm looking in here and it's just showing me like root to game directory, just start typing, slash levels slash Utah for if you're Utah slash hit enter, and there you go. So there's your main root directory. So if you're ever stuck in like a gameplay folder and I can't get to my map folder, just start typing in the search there or in the file thing slash levels, and it should get you there once you manually tell it, because it's pretty good about deciding like, do I need to look in gameplays or your app data levels folder, and it seems to like streamline both. I don't know, it like looks in both, it uses both. So finding it's usually not an issue as long as you use the slash method. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to path it to my ground cover art shapes ground cover. So you can see in here there's all my DAE files that I have. So I kind of can start like testing things, like if I hit green tiny and hit open. So now you can see in here it's green tiny. So if I do try and paint green tiny on, what is that, grass 1? That's just grass. 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 So green tiny is that. So if I take it another step further, look for another one. Some of these don't work. I don't know. See, I don't have the JSON set up for that. Oh boy. My material. I was gonna delete that guy anyways. What's the best? That looks pretty cool. What is that? Utah bush flat, green flat. That looks cool. Yeah, whatever. I guess I can use. So I can. Oh, Control Z. What did I do? Make sure you go to Object Select. There we go. Okay. Object Select. So now that's essentially grass. So if I paint new grass, essentially it's going to use that DAE file and say, oh, here's new grass. But, it's customizable. So if I go in here, looking at, dissolve radius, some of these things can be changed. Some of these affect the render distance. So if you look out on my object, make sure I'm on object before I click anything. So see how it's in the distance, rendering, de-rendering certain distance? You can actually modify that. Sometimes it doesn't matter because you're at ground level, driving at ground level, it doesn't matter. You don't want to increase render distance too much because of performance sake, but some of that stuff I leave at default, so I'll just probably leave these here for a sec. Let's see, grid size. So if I go to my basic Utah grass template, which shows the settings, if I look at some of these, this could help clarify what you should be seeing in here. So this max elements 600,000, that's not abnormal. That's kind of normal. So if I look at grid size, really I'm looking at grid size, and that needs to be about 7 or 8. That's usually like the numbers I'm seeing. So 7 or 8. I've seen 5, but 6. But grass is set to 7 on. So let me just change that to 7, and I hit enter after, and then max elements, I made that 600,000. So another point is that if I create a new guy, remember I said it's not going to save the settings in here. If I do Control C, I think if I do Control C, copy the, anytime you're like in this box and you do Control C, and then I do something else in another box, it actually Control V and paste all of the settings usually. So it's kind of like a Blender thing, which is kind of cool. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it doesn't. Oh well. I thought it did. So I guess that brings me to my next point, which in a lot of cases, when you go through and you have to create a new ground cover, you have to manually adjust some of these settings. Like there's a lot of these boxes where you can control C and control V settings, but ground cover doesn't appear to be one of them now. So if I do like a new ground cover right there, I really just got to eyeball these settings together. So if I, I'll be using my scene tree. If I hit this, I'm seeing, that's dry grass, that's radius 150, 100. I'll probably just change that off the bat, 150, 100. And obviously I would compare these to the settings of the ground cover items I see in Utah, but reflect scale says 0 in Utah, so I'm just going to set that to 0. Maybe that's a performance thing. I don't really need reflections on grass, so we can leave that at 0. Grid size, I think that, what did I say? Yeah, so grid for grass too. You can look at the settings on Utah, but it's like 6 or something. But anyway, I'm just gonna leave that at 7 for now. The seed doesn't matter. That's just a seed of the procedural rendering. Like you can change the seed in Blender of a instance on a surface. It's just a seed. It doesn't really affect anything but how it looks visually. 10, whatever. I'll just leave it at 1. It doesn't change much. It's kind of weird. Sometimes some of the stuff you can't actually see until you restart the game. So kind of going into it knowing, what settings to use is probably best. But anyway, it looks like I don't have my shape name right here. What happened? Oh, that's for the new one I created. So let's go back and let me just cancel that. So file shape name. I just want to go back to my, so levels, Fury, Utah, / Let me just go there, art, shapes, ground cover. I'm just going to set it to something that wasn't already set. Because I'm just trying to make like kind of an array of grass on my map, But Utah grass is top. What does that look like? Open. So that's set. Let me just do a Control S. So if I go to my terrain painter and I choose, I gotta do my types, right? Yeah, I got a layer. It's gonna be called grass. Let's just say grass 2, because that should match. Enter. That should match this guy. So what happens if I save the map and paint grass 2? Nothing. Let's see. Grass 2, not working. Could be that. Could be the DAE. Let's see. Let me open that. Nope. Let's see. Max elements 1000. Let me change that to 600,000. There you go. There's some grass. So, not sure that's the grass I want. So let me do the 3 dots. Go back in this menu. Let me just pick another DAE file. Only looking for DAE, so let's try Utah grasses clump. Open. Oh, that's big. Too much. Too much. Flat. That's very similar to the first one, but grass clump small. Oh boy, not what I wanted. Alright, let's try another DAE. Nah. Because I'll have to stick to something like this. That could work. It's a little bit more green. So I guess, what was that? I'll look at it here. Let me cancel that. So right here, what was it? Grass is top 2. Is this fancy? Oh, what am I doing here? Control Z. Man, anytime you hit anything, just escape. Press escape and it'll get you out of any cursor that's flashing. If you're flashing on a cursor and you start typing, trying to look around, pressing W, you're going to really mess up some stuff. So just be careful there. So let me just Control S on the map. So I got that. So let me just do one more. I want to do a grass 3. Make it really fancy. So if I'm looking at grass 3, Right now it does that, right? Grass 3 does that. So let me change that. So if I go to my guy here, maybe, oh, I'll just use that one. So if I go to my metal leaf and make sure that this shapefile name has something in it, which again will be levels. Art shapes ground cover. Do the, let's see, what else can I put in there? The top, what does that look like? Oh, this, make sure your max elements is set to 600,000. Then if I do my terrain paint and paint some grass 3, doesn't work. Let's see, why not? Oh, I didn't do my, so types, grass 3. So I can just backspace that and say grass 3, hit enter. Now, let's see. Oh, I think I'm getting it, but it's needs to be tweaked. Let's see. Oh, okay, that's right. Grid size. Let's see. Anything over here? Let me look at. Let me see if I can make sure it's not working. Grass 3. Yeah, it's working. It's just my looks needs to be increased. 7. Let's try 8. No, 8, 8, 9, 15, 20 on the grid size. I don't know. 30. Maybe too much. I'll just go back down to 7 or 10. That's not. What if I boosted this 800,000? There you go. Hey, 800,000 little instance leaves, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. That's all I wanted to say. If you followed my previous video, now you can have 3 different types of properly terrain painted grass by using the DAE file method, I guess, in the types layering. So you basically can add multiple layers. If you wanted to, you can actually create a second layer. You can experiment with that. I'm not gonna. I don't need to. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. I don't think I covered it all, but great. I'm glad it works.